Hi, this is Emily Wilson from Huntington Learning Center of East Boise, here to talk to you about test taking and finals, which are coming up here pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. There are a lot of anxieties that are surrounding test taking, a lot of concerns surrounding your student studying and putting in the effort, not cramming the night before. So today I'm going to share with you our top tips in terms of how to set them up for success and how to create a schedule that's going to work best for them as you move forward into finals week. So we always joke around here, there are kind of two versions of studying for a test. There's the parent version, right, which is our Benjamin Franklin quote here. If a man empties a purse into his head, no man can take it away from him. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Then we have the student version, right? Studying, the act of texting, eating, watching TV with an open textbook nearby. I'm sure a lot of you can relate with one or the other of these two pieces. And so let's talk about how we can move it into a more tangible and achievable goal of preparing for finals. So the first thing that is so important, especially now that finals is coming up, is to plan ahead. This is not something that you can jump into the night before. Planning ahead is critical when it comes to preparing for tests. My number one piece here is just don't cram. I know that a lot of students say, I do so much better when I cram. I do a lot better under pressure. Unfortunately, statistically, that's not true. So I always say do not cram for your tests. In fact, studies show that you only remember 20% of the information that you cram, and that leads to a 20% in terms of your final grade, which is never going to be good in terms of the end of the semester. Create a realistic schedule, right? And be very specific. Don't just say, oh, Monday I'll start studying for English. Set out a time. So Monday, I'm going to study Shakespeare's comedies for 30 minutes. Set yourself up for success by creating really strict parameters when planning ahead. And finally, stick to your schedule. It's easy to get off, but don't abandon. Perseverance is key. If one day doesn't go as well, maybe you get stuck at school late, or you end up going to a football game or a soccer game. Get back on that track, because if you let one day throw everything off, then you're going to get to the day of the final and be completely unprepared. Next, as well as planning ahead, don't overdo the studying. We have all reached a point where we cannot look at something any longer, whether it's the slideshow, the note cards, the outline that you've created. Don't overdo your studying. What I always do is I follow the 25 and 5 rule. So for every 25 minutes of studying, take a 5-minute break. That allows you to process the information, to step away. But I am also a big proponent, parents, don't ban technology when they're studying. That's not going to work. Their thoughts are going to be on the text or the Instagram post or anything like that. So set a timer for 25 minutes. Once that 25 minutes is complete, those 5 minutes are their own. If they want to sit and stare at their phone for 5 minutes, so be it. But then they have to dive right back in once that time is up. A really good idea here is grab a kitchen timer, right? I use kitchen timers all the time with my students. It keeps them accountable. There's also one online, it's called Marinara Timer, and it follows this idea of the 25 and 5 rule, and it's a great resource for families when studying. Next up, make your own study guides. You have all been given that sheet of paper from the teacher that is gibberish, right? Put the information into a way that you best understand it. Recreate the notes, right? Put it in a format that works best, whether that's flashcards, an outline, Cornell notes, using mnemonic devices, whatever is the best way for you to learn, channel your studying into that format. There's nothing worse than hitting your head against the wall because you can't comprehend the outline when you're really a flashcard person. Nothing says that you have to follow through with what you've been given. Make sure that you set yourself up for success. Testing anxiety. Now, I would say that one of the biggest concerns I hear from parents and families is testing anxiety, especially in a society where your student is taking a lot of tests. And so there are some really easy ways to combat testing anxiety and help your student feel prepared. I always say, however, the number one thing, being thoroughly prepared will mitigate any anxiety that you feel as a student, okay? So don't allow anything to just slide by you. If you're thoroughly prepared, then you can, take out 50% of any anxiety you feel surrounding a test. Also, some things to practice are some breathing techniques. I do what is called box breathing. So it's where you breathe in, hold, out, hold for 4 seconds each time. And that allows you to clear your head, get recentered and refocused, and any of those anxiety and that feeling that's starting to bubble up in you surrounding the test can, tend to go away. I always say too, don't get stuck on one question, right? We all have the nightmare of looking at the first question and not knowing what the answer is, and that can tank the rest of your performance. Do not get stuck on those questions. Answer the questions you know first, calm your nerves, and go from there. Nobody said that you have to go in order when a teacher gives you a packet, right? Make sure that you are moving about it in the way that's best for you. Some tips in terms of anxiety surrounding essays. A lot of students that we work with the idea of a blank page is just overwhelming to them. What I always say is just start writing and planning. Even if that's just a really simple outline, that will start to jog your memory and that will help you to get started, essentially. In the end, however, if you are truly struggling with some crippling testing anxiety, talk with your teacher. They would rather know that information than for you to stay silent. As a former classroom teacher myself, I always welcomed a student advocating for themselves and saying, I really am stressed about this test. How can you help me out? There are a lot of techniques that aren't going to create a lot of work for your teachers that I'm sure that they would be happy to do. Whether that is, we have students who want a timer on their desk. They're so test anxious and time anxious that looking at the clock a million times during the test just cuts down on their time that they have. So they have a timer right on their desk. Others don't want to see the time, right? They want like a 5-minute warning and that's it. A student that I've worked with in the past was overwhelmed by getting a packet set on their desk for a test. And so I would give them a page at a time. So however works best for you, come up with some concrete solutions and approach your teacher. Know that ultimately they have the final say, but they're going to be willing to help if you approach them. Here are some general test-taking tips that I think are really important and can be very helpful when actually sitting down for finals. In general, jot down key concepts, equations, and vocab terms in the margin immediately, right? If you have that one piece of information that you constantly forget, but you've got it before the test to sit down, just jot it on your test, right? And then you can erase it later. It's a great way to get out any of the information that you might be struggling with. You don't have to go in order, right? Feel free to skip around the test. Don't get hemmed in by the going 1, 2, 3, 4. Ensure that you really understand what's being asked. Is this question truly asking me to pick 2 answers or just one? Am I supposed to write a 5-paragraph essay or just a paragraph? Read the directions carefully. I can't tell you how many times a student misses a question simply because they didn't read to start. Absolutes are usually incorrect. So if you see an always, a never, an everyone, that is usually a red flag to you that that's not going to be a correct answer. So that's an easy way for you to try to get your answer choices down. Budget your time, right? Don't spend all your 10 minutes on a question that you know you're never going to get. Make sure that you can skip and come back. And finally, trust your gut. So many times I have students who erased an answer and chose a different one and their first one was correct. So if you have a gut answer, a gut choice, leave it, okay? Test specific. If you have multiple choice, right, make sure you eliminate, right? If you have 4 choices and you're able to eliminate 1, that's already improving your odds. And then also keep an eye out for those absolutes. Short answers, search the prompt for clues, right? So if it is using different pronouns, it can show you, okay, I'm supposed to write about multiple people, about the females, whatever that might be, that can be a good hint to you. Matching, skip and come back, right? If you are able to get down to the last 3 and you don't know them, again, you have a better choice of being able to pick from those 3 as opposed to a list of 10 or 15. Fill in the blank. That's really where memorization techniques are going to come into play, right? So practice those memorization pieces. And finally, as I mentioned with essay, underline the key details in the prompt, create a simple outline, and then start writing. Finally, utilize your resources, right? Reach out to your peers. Maybe you form a study group. I, however, know that schedules are tight, right? It doesn't always have to be an in-person study group. I worked with a group of students who had a WhatsApp group chat where they sent each other questions throughout the week and everybody could respond. And that was their simple way of studying through text. Compare those notes, right? What do you have for this topic? What do you think is going to be important? Simply talk it out with somebody. And as always, right, approach your teacher. Don't be afraid to approach and ask questions, especially if you have a specific thing that you need to ask them about the test. I always say, let's say it's the night, it's during the evening, right? And you either don't have time to approach them the next day, shoot them an email, right? However, make sure you're really specific, not just, I'm stressed about this test, what do I do, right? And be really formal in your tone, right? Your teacher is a professional and you should treat them as such. So, dear Mr. and Mrs., correct grammar, and signing off, not using emojis or exclamation points, and be very specific with your question. They'll be willing to help you. Okay, so it is finals week. You have prepared, you are ready to go. What are some last minute things that you should keep an eye out for? Number one is bedtime. I think that a big mistake that parents push and also students make is, okay, my finals tomorrow, I'm gonna go to bed at 8 p.m. when they typically go to bed at midnight. Huge changes can hurt you in the end, right? So try to be reasonable, but don't change your routine up too much. If you typically go to bed at midnight, try 10:30 or 11. That can be a great way for you to be able to still get some extra sleep, but not change it too much. Eat breakfast, right? Also take snacks and a lunch. Make sure that you are full, right? You are ready to take those tests and that your stomach growling is not going to be the thing that's your downfall. Review your notes, but ultimately remember that you are prepared, right? There can be a lot of last minute stress finals week, but if you have put in the time, you should be good to go. And as always, I really always hit on this. Don't let the emotions of others influence you. So if you have a friend who did not prepare and is panicking about a test, don't let that transfer onto you, right? Or let's say that you have a final where you all take a break in the middle and everybody starts chatting about the hard questions. That could also tank the second half of the test for you. So don't let others influence you, right? Practice your box breathing and know that you are ready to go. I always put this in there just as a caveat. I hope that this is not the case for you or for your student. If you're still unprepared the night before, cram only as a last resort. And by cram, I don't just mean read over and over and over and over again. Be very strategic. Make a list of the top 5 topics and study them intensely, right? It's one thing to say, I know these 5 things are going to be really focused on and I need to get the key details from them. That seems much more manageable than I have 5 months worth of notes that I need to figure out tonight, okay? So make a list, prioritize, and study them intensely. Remember, at this point, repetition is going to be key. Thinking and continuing to repeat those key details is where you're going to see the most bang for your buck, essentially. Really, to resolve not to procrastinate again. You're only hurting yourself. So if you do find yourself in this situation, understand that this stress is unwarranted, right? You are able to prepare and be ready. And also don't create the narrative that you do better under pressure. I hear that so often, and I really want to impart to students that's not the case. As much as you may think it is, it's not the case. So in the end, finals week is coming up. Make sure that you and your students are prepared by following through with some of these simple tricks, and that will allow you to get those grades that you've earned after 5 months of working and allow you to enter into second semester ready to go with a great grade.